Overseen by a Senate that comprises the academic leadership of the university. UKZN has over 49,000 students enrolled in some 2,000 programs across the 4 colleges. Approximately 75% of these are undergraduate and the rest are postgraduate. The university enjoys a rich cultural diversity.
Specifically.
Comprising international students from 82 countries. Our 4,200 staff members come from 50 different countries. And institutional values that guide our daily interactions.
Spey, how are you?
Excellence, accountability, client orientation, honesty, and trust. Known as SWEET, these operational values underpin how the university conducts all aspects of its business. Our transformation charter has been key in steering our university's identity and culture. And transformation and excellence are closely paired, enabling us to meet the higher education, teaching and research needs of South Africa and achieve our vision as the premier university of African scholarship. We are a proud institution of higher learning, and it is our responsibility to push academic, cultural, and sports standards of excellence for the province of South Africa. Our passionate staff take this responsibility to heart as they embrace the UKZN spirit and ethos. UKZN's 5-year strategic plan, launched in 2017, outlines the institutional culture, goals, and enablers that will help us realize our full potential as South Africa's university of choice for the country's most talented students and scholars. By focusing on excellence in teaching and learning, high-impact societal and stakeholder community engagement, targeted internationalization, and excellence in high-impact research, innovation, and entrepreneurship, UKZN aims to contribute meaningfully to the future of South Africa and add real value to all its stakeholders.
Good morning. Can somebody hear me? Hello, can somebody hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, good. Thank you. I was doubting whether my speaker is not working or my microphone is not working properly. To the co-host, I'm one of the presenters for today. So when the time is set, you can let me know, please.
Okay. Good morning, colleagues. Let's give just, I could see that colleagues are coming slowly, but let's just give maybe 5 minutes before we could start. Good morning again, colleagues. I think we can start because it may be dangerous for us to wait whilst we don't know how many people will be joining our room here. Let me start by greeting all of you and also welcoming you again in our conference or in our symposium, which is on the Pan-African City, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. But the session that we are in it today, we are in a session of climate change, innovations, and technology in urban space. A person who's greeting you, Dr. Symposium, who is a senior lecturer in the housing discipline in the School of Built Environment and Development Studies, and also a co-editor of the published book on the political economy of government subsidized housing in South Africa, and also a principal investigator for innovation capacity, innovation measurements project, and I was also a principal investigator also for a sustainable human settlement decision support tools, and also municipal innovation maturity index. Where with those few words, colleagues, I would want to welcome you. I know that I will be your co-chair for this session. I'm also having Tobile, who's also going to be a co-chair also of this session. And some few house rules maybe before I continue. Presenters are advised to keep their cameras on to make themselves known to the audience, because I don't have their bio on my side. So therefore, I will request that they do so. Maybe even before I proceed, I think I will want to start with these few remarks, more particularly in line with this thematic area or this session here. As I've already indicated, that it's more on climate change. So we all know that climate change is emerging as one of the new entrants in the list changes favoring human settlement. So there's a need to analyze dimensions of climate change, their impact on human settlement, and mechanisms that are being proffered to ameliorate its harmful effect. So the transformation of human settlement requires alternatives and at times innovative approaches which are responsive to various stakeholders. And also the stagnation of human settlements and the failure to address prevailing challenges require thinking outside the box. Through this symposium, then we seek to learn from living experiences of alternative and innovative technologies and their future roles in human settlement. So as we continue, we all know that cities in the global south are growing at an extraordinary pace, such that urban growth patterns have created what we call several spatial urban expansion challenges that have impeded the development process. So we'll all know that there's already in our public discourse that there are fundamental three challenges that confront the urban expansion around the world, which is environmental deterioration, climate change, and also social inequity. So within those knowledge, which is in the public discourse, then these challenges are closely associated with three deep transition, which the first transition refers to the functioning of societal subsystems such as poverty, urban duality, and also the economy. And the second transition, which refers to the development and the expansion of a wide range of socio-technical systems for the provision of land, transport, energy, food, housing, healthcare, communications, and other purposes. And then the third transition, which describes the impact of climate change on on biodiversity loss, as well as the spatial and ecological hazard that have threatened the planet, whether in the past, present, and future. But also, I think this symposium is also taking place when climate change had effects, which we are already observing, more particularly in the world. But we'll all know that where the symposium is based currently, in 2018 and in also 2022, there were disasters in terms of flood in KwaZulu-Natal, which we all know that they've been able to affect the majority of our people in such an extent that they've been a high cost to society through a loss of life, damage to basic services, infrastructure, and industry. And if we also look at that, we'll all know that in 2019, the Intergovernmental Panel of Climate Change report argues that we have just 10 years left until climate breakdown is irreversible. But also within that public discourse that there's an argument that solving climate change must be transformative across the entire economy. With those few introductory remarks, colleagues, I would want to specifically highlight that in this session, we'll have 4 presentations. So the first presentation will be, or the first presenter will be Dr. Siviwe Shwababa. We'll be looking at a topic, an eco-friendly approach to construction management, a case of South African construction industry. I would want to take this opportunity to welcome the first presenters of our session here. As indicated earlier, that I will request that they introduce themselves to the audience before they proceed with their presentation. I thank you. Can I invite the presenter, please, so that we are having a bit of problem with time. I think I'll give the first presenter 20 minutes, according to the program here.
Good morning. The room chair is still trying to join, and he has asked us to proceed with the first speaker. So over to you, Prof. Gambo.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Let me proceed on to share my presentation.
We are waiting for the first presenter, please.
The first presenters is Dr. Siviwe and Prof. Brian. Dr. Siviwe and Prof. Brian, kindly unmute and start, please.
Are you experiencing some problems, Dr. Siviwe or Prof. Brian? Okay.
I have shared the screen presentation as requested.
Okay, whoever is presenting, please unmute yourself and proceed.
This is Brian Wasserman. I'm going to go ahead. I am getting a different presentation started.
Is this presentation different to what you have?
No, this is my presentation. It is our presentation. I have my message at the top of the screen. It says you can control Sophie Bailey's screen. I'm controlling some. Okay, so that's your screen.
Yes,
They had a
that's my
second
screen. You
presentation
can
that's
control. Yes,
Okay.
you can control yourself on
Okay.
your side. Yes.
Okay, so Dr. Schwababa and Dr. Wasserman collaborated on this, and let me see if I can get. Are we there? Okay. I think the important piece here is that we have an opportunity to link sustainability and construction. And as I was listening to the morning session, there are many in our group who are on public policy. I know mortgage finance was one, but Professor Jordan talking about innovations and how do we involve the construction industry. So we can make lots of plans, but if someone does not fulfill those plans, if someone is not capable of following the plans, then all those wonderful plans are not live in construction practices. And so there's an element to our group that we need to include, and that is the industry. How do we get people to be part of a environmental and sustainable construction industry? I'm trying to change screens. There we go. Being green means being a nerd in some places. Being green is not relevant to people if they're hungry. Being green is not relevant to people if they have enough money that they can buy whatever they want to. But being green needs to be, and as the third point says, it's not a disintegrated practice. It is an integrated practice in all that we do. It's important to continue to make being green and being sustainable significant in all of our lives. Can we go ahead? So this is the key, and I know it's a little bit long, but it's from United Nations World Commission on Environment. And I think the key piece here is that we are doing development, which we need. I think that's agreed by everybody else. I'd rather not live in a cave, that meets the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And if everything we do is with that lens, I happen to be a grandparent and I know my 8 grandchildren. Those are important people in my life, and thinking about how they are going to meet their needs is important to me. So I need to make sure that I leave enough on this earth that they also are able to meet their needs. So that's my future generation, my own grandchildren. Go ahead. So we have social, economic, and environmental, and so many things involved. That's what this conference is about. But at the heart of that ends up being this sustainability section. So we have all the environmental laws and public involvement and all of those things. We have all of the economic issues. We have all of the social issues, all of the environmental issues. And if we can be at the intersection of all 3 circles, we will find ourselves in this place called sustainability. And that's the goal. How close to that intersection can we be? Thank you. So construction is big. As we know, construction uses a lot of energy. Our numbers are saying 36%, 1/3 of all the worldwide energy usage, and 40% of the CO2 emissions. We are impacted all the time, every day, by things in construction. And as an industry, it's important that we spend some time with them, pull them into our discussions, and make it every effort that as a global polluter, that they're involved as part of the process of reducing that and becoming more and more sustainable. Construction industry and its environmental impacts, well, there they are. We have, I found the back and forth click link. Thank you. We provide many jobs, and that's a good thing. We're able to finance, and that's a good thing. We're able to work with many materials, and that's a good thing. But the energy consumption goes up, the electricity use goes up, the gas and water with any new development, and traffic. And as we build roads, people are driving their cars on them. And so we not only use the energy, but we encourage others to use energy too, as this process happens. This is a key concern. It's a biological concern, and excuse me, the biodiversity. Lack of biodiversity in South Africa is a wonderful place for biodiversity, but it is threatened by urban development. As someone mentioned, the cities are growing, they're growing rapidly. Wherever you are, the cities are growing rapidly. And all of that pushes our biodiversity further and further out of the city and into environments that are not necessarily healthy. So the construction affects the environment in the most basic way. In the United States, we clear a lot of cornfields. and build on those. We'll clear wetlands and build on those, and then wonder why things flood. It's a challenge to not disturb habitats. And I know there's a lot of attention to that, but it's not just the, it is about biodiversity and finding ways to live with the environment as opposed to just destroying them. And here, you know, cute slide, but CO2, there we go. Construction in South Africa, 12.3 million metric tons was the 2018 number. And so more and more CO2, use of energy, more and more coal-fired power plants to produce that energy, 40% of emissions globally. And we can add to the CO2, nitrogen, and sulfur dioxide. So it's a challenge. Where do we get the energy? How do we use less? Everybody is on the same track trying to find ways to be more sustainable. So also we have a lot of site contamination, and those are difficult to remove once they're in the ground. So if we pollute the groundwater with things that drain out of our construction site, then we have to try to find a way to treat that. And that involves much more use of energy to treat the treat groundwater that's been polluted by oils and gas and other things that are thrown on the ground. So that can be a sustainable topic as well. So there's my soil. How do I make sure that these kinds of things don't happen? So the contaminated soil is not good for anyone. And then sometimes people build on the contaminated soil and they have difficulty with water. They have difficulty with health. All of those things are a challenge for them. One of the things that we have to understand is that this is a whole long system. We have to think about, where do I get the raw material for my materials? So I have mining, extraction industry, then I have to make those things, then I have to use them in construction, then we use them for a period of time, sometimes, you know, briefly, even just a few years. You know, how old is a good house? If it's 50 years old, if things are 100 years, that's a long time of use. But at the end of the day, we end up in demolition, and so we have to tear it down. So do we have deconstruction, or do we just rip everything down and never use it again? The whole long system, and where can we make this a more sustainable system? Concrete is one of our most used materials. It's great because it lasts a long time. On the other hand, a lot of water and a lot of carbon goes into the use of the concrete. So here's our trade-off, in which is more sustainable. Actually, making of the cement that goes into the concrete is one of the most power-intensive processes that we have. And so the cement, as opposed to the concrete, just making the powder, the Portland cement that becomes concrete, is a very unsustainable kind of activity. And this one is also modern, used all kinds of times. It's PVC, polyvinyl chloride. And now we're looking at long-term, though not quick effects. It's not a healthy material for us to be drinking water out of, although it's much cheaper than using copper for pipes for water. And it's more available most of the time than copper, But now we have these 10 and 20 and 50 years worth of a material that is not healthy for us. What do we do with our wastes? European Union has 2 billion tons of waste. Half of it is construction waste. So we tear down a building, where does it go? It goes to a landfill. How do we handle all of those things becomes one of the sustainable topics that we have to deal with. How much is brought to a construction site and then never used and ends up straight into the dump, never even got used? All of this contaminates soil, reduces biodiversity. Where do we put all of our materials? So a few sustainable construction practices. We have to start with building design. And I know there are architects that are part of our group. How do you design a building to be more sustainable, to use less energy, to use materials that are less intensive to produce? How do we improve our construction methods so that we have a long-term benefit and not just short-term costs? Everybody wants to make money. I want to build a building. I want to make some money. So my thought in construction is often very short-term and not long-term. How do we train people into the concept of sustainability, even to think about it? Not everybody has sustainability on their minds every day they go to work. And then how do we reduce, reuse, and recycle our materials? So reduce is first, of course, reuse is second, recycle is third. That's an entirely significant, ingrained into our young people kind of topic that we have to have. So the take home is a construction project. Yep, I still want the diversity. Yes, I still want the development, but sustainability as at its core. How do we do that? Dr. Schwababa, are you able to unmute and weigh in on the presentation? Okay, so for the sake of the group, let's move on. If Saviwe is able to get in, maybe we could make a few moments for him to share more about sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. I'm not sure whether Dr. Severe will want to continue to where Prof ended. You can unmute yourself if you still want to finalize something on the presentation.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you very much. Apologies for the noise and that, and I'm battling some connectivity where I am, but Prof. Wasserman has basically covered the entire content of the presentation, but really the thrust of it is about embracing sustainability in infrastructural development, in construction projects. There's a lot of room for that at the moment. And as much as we are pushing the development narrative, but let us ask ourselves, it's at what cost? Does it really have to cost us this much? We are, especially here in South Africa, we are a water scarce country. We are faced with challenges of food insecurity. those are not going to go away. They are here to almost stay. But the challenge is for us to be able to balance. Whilst you are pursuing development, let's pursue it in a responsible way, responsible enough to take care of our ecosystems, to take care of our natural resources, and so that even our future generation can be able to at least enjoy what we're enjoying, you know. So that is my contribution, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to Prof. Brian. I think that was a very insightful presentation in which we have started by giving us a definition of sustainable development, but also at the same time, you're also reminding us in terms of how then we should be able to apply that in the construction industry. I think in your presentation, you also covered in terms of how then the sustainable, which I will call the life cycle of sustainability. You touch upon issues of social, economic, and also environmental. But you also indicated that construction industry impact on the environmental through that particular process then, but also the very same industry consumes a lot of energy. And also Dr. Ziviwe is also emphasizing the issue that South Africa is also having some challenges when it comes to water. I think in the last presentation, what has been covered is that how do we design sustainable buildings, but also at the same time, how do we improve construction methods? How do you train people to be able to follow the application of this principle or this concept of sustainability? But at the same time, how do we reduce and reuse waste? Because the construction industry, it seems to be generating a lot of waste. With those few remarks that I've given, let me just invite our participants here if they've got some questions. Maybe we can just take 5 minutes for questions before we allow the second presentation to proceed. Any reaction from our participants at this point? In the meantime, I can't see any reaction, Prof, but let me just use this opportunity, Prof, to just ask maybe one question. I'm sure that in our context, we are faced with a challenge in terms of how to balance. I'm sure that we have looked at the South African context. We have always been arguing that this is what we call, and we also heard that from even in the plenary, in terms of that we are being affected by the problem of housing backlog, or we are in housing deficit. Then the question that I have, how then do we balance whilst we are trying to respond to the problem of the housing deficit, but also on the other hand, then we are also ensuring that we are becoming environmentally friendly. Maybe are there some possible suggestions also around that, because we all know that if ever project have to proceed, the issue of environment is taken into very serious consideration of late. So therefore, how do we balance the two then, if I may ask? I'm not sure whether, Prof, can you respond to that?
It is the challenge, isn't it? The townships are often built on land that nobody wants. And so now they end up being built in floodplains. They end up being built in hazardous places because nobody else wants to be there. So how do we turn the policy so that proper houses are built in proper places? I know one of my observations from the South Africa visits has been many of the townships, even though they're well built, are built so far from an economy. So now we're taking taxi to work every day. We can't walk, we can't drive. And so we build far from the economic center because that land is cheap. And so we go back to some of our opening session topics about mortgage finance, about renting to own, about innovations. So we have this combination challenge that takes that circle. If we go back to the slide with the 3 circles, we have those social issues, we have the economic issues, we have the sustainability issues. And how do you balance those? That is an art, not a science. It would be nice if we can say 1 + 1 + 1 and okay, we're good. But that's just not how life works for us. So it's a challenge. It's an everyday and every project challenge for us to be able to balance all of those pieces of getting a project done.
Recording stopped.
Thank you so much, Prof. I'm not sure whether are there any other follow-up questions. I can see that yes, viewer, you have got your hand up. Can you please unmute yourself and continue?
Thank you, Chair. It's just an addition in terms of what you said in terms of where do we start. It all starts with consciousness, just raising the levels of consciousness and awareness around investing in eco-friendly, construction methods. It's never too late to get started, but the problem is just the consciousness around it. The current traditional, conventional construction methods are just not sustainable at their very core. They are just not sustainable. I mean, the paper alludes to the usage of cement, for example, which it's an intrinsic, material, raw material within the construction industry that, construction practitioners are not prepared to part ways from, So it starts with just raising the level of awareness and consciousness in the, with the role players, significant role players, industry, the construction sector, and also in raising the awareness to bring forth, a level of awareness that this at the core of it, if we get stuck to the conventional ways of constructing and, infrastructural development, in the long term, the people that will bear the brunt for this are the poorest of the poor, basically. Prof. Wasserman alluded to the fact that, even, when it comes to township establishment, more often than not, those settlements are, constructed in fallow land, in land that no one wants to use. But who then gets to settle, even in those settlements? It's the poorest, segment of our population. So at the core of it, it's just unsustainable. It's time that we heighten the levels of consciousness towards embracing sustainable, eco-friendly construction methods, so that we can alleviate the burden that is currently on the poor, and hopefully, have a more sustainable future going forward for our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any other reaction, maybe just for 1 minute from our participants here? If no reaction, we are also reminded to use the chat box where possible. We are also reminded to use the chat box where possible there. We also want to take an opportunity to thank the first presenters. I'm sure that maybe towards the end, if time will still allow us, maybe we'll also continue part of this conversation. It's also very interesting. But let me also call the second presenter, Prof. Brian Wasserman. according to my according to my program here, you're supposed to be the next presenter also on Isibaya, an eco-friendly foster care village concept. I think that's the title that you'll be presenting after. Let me also give you that opportunity to proceed with the second presentation.
Thank you. And you're putting that on the screen for me?
We do not receive a presentation for Isibaya, an eco-friendly
Oh.
foster care village.
Okay, then I will share screen here just a moment.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I trust that you are seeing my screen.
Yes, Prof, we can see your screen.
Excellent. So Isibaya, Housing a Sustainable Future for Our Children. This comes in the inequity section of this conference. And we know that there are far too many young people with not a home in the townships. And how do we create something different? And so including Ron Begbie, who is not with us today. He is an architect currently living in Cape Town and a designer, not a builder. It's one of the pieces that I was able to connect with Ron when I was living in South Africa. And this was his idea to begin with, and then me, the builder, was working on trying to get this established. It did not get established, so it is a prototype that we would like to see established at some point, if that would at all be possible. But our children are the great asset that we have, and taking care of children and helping them to establish themselves as successful young adults is a first priority in trying to pass the baton on to the next generation. So Isibaya, an eco village, meaning sustainable. And the concept here is that we would have foster families. And this was designed for the Eastern Cape. It is entirely possible to take this prototype anywhere in the world. But this was the Eastern Cape. We have Buffalo City. We have a wonderful ocean view. I spent 6 months in Ganubi, just outside of East London. And let's see, I think that's okay. There's a Momfley community, East London, Eastern Cape, a fairly large township. So it's near Ganubi. We worked with a Section 21 nonprofit with extended track record, and I invite Saviwe to be part of this as well, because he was the advisory board chair for a time with the Section 21 nonprofit. The idea is that we can't build 24 homes all at the same time and then try to fill them. It was a balance and a phased in. And the foster homes, someone else had mentioned rent to own, and these would be rented houses with a possibility of saving rent money for the families, because again, not part of the culture to save money for a down payment for their own house. Our issue ended up being land tenure, which is a huge issue. And I'm not going to pretend to be an expert, but what I do know is that land that was given, donated by an organization in South Africa, was not given in a title to the Section 21 nonprofit. It was given to an individual. And so now that land is controlled by an individual. And so I was educated about Section 21 nonprofit and land tenure in a way that I had never been educated about it before. Who owns that property? And what can I do with that property? And someone gives me permission to build, but they own the property. It becomes a challenge, because we were talking about multiple millions of rand for a project like this. And if we don't own the property, then we don't have any long-term viability. So this is a layout of the homes. So this is north up here, and we're talking about section A, B, and C, and being able to create this in 3 phases. One of the things that is a very significant concern for children is safety. And we need to make sure that these children are safe. And so having a fence that is that works like a fence should is an important piece. But what we don't see much of in the townships in South Africa would be green space, trees, lawns, places that children can go play. That is very much missing in most of our township development, because people are focused on building a house and not on building a soccer pitch or netball courts or things like that. So green space is vital to the well-being of our children. That's at least my opinion. And I know others would share that as well. And so how do you create a space? And again, we said not too large. We're in the 20s for houses and probably 6 children in each. So we're looking at somewhere between 100 and 150 children total in the development, and not trying to make this thousands and thousands of young people who don't have parents who need fostering and are able to live in this space. So rather than try to build a mega township or mega city for that township, we're saying, let's keep the numbers somewhat controlled. And when we work with the children, they'll be there until they're ready to be young adults. They'll have a home, and we know they have a good home. And I think that's the right sustainable topic. We can't do everything for everybody, but we can do some things. So within Buffalo City, lots of informal settlements, RDP houses, some informal housing. Nzimomfle is not the largest of the townships in the area, but it's very representative of township living. HIV, local clinics, 30% of pregnant women are infected with HIV yet. Unemployment, extremely high. Child rape, it's a huge number. Child-headed households, a huge number. And so now we're talking about having, 12 and 13-year-old girls who are trying to be a mother. Domestic violence is everywhere. Substance abuse, widespread. No safe place for the children. And I see that as being a huge issue. And while we were living there, there were a number of people who were electrocuted between a rain and electric wiring on the ground. You know, it's just not a safe place. Between that and all of the other violence, let's find a way where some of the children can come out of that and find a home. So here's our why. Well, we have a lot of arguments, but having a place for foster children and families, so we don't think the old boarding house style is the right way to go, where there's a parent or parent figure, I guess, with hundreds of children all living on bunk beds in long dorm rooms. That's not how a family grows up. And we think we should be like a family, as much like a family as possible. So 2 parents and about 6 children, and the people learning how to be a family. Having a family role model is important to young people. I think we can all agree on that. So within Ganubi, Mzimamfle is a far from ideal, as I've said. Not a great place to grow up, nurture, empower. You know, and the children, most of them struggle to learn, because if you're hungry, you're not learning very well. If you're afraid because somebody's going to break into your shack and do damage of one sort or another, it's pretty hard to go to school the next day ready to learn. So, and foster parents, and there were, in my experience, many foster parents in the township, but they need support. And they need some understanding from people in the same role. So the foster parents would be a key piece of what we're building. Parents would come in, and many of them are fostering children who are related to them. So the responsible parents doing everything they can, and to have a safe and warm, dry home to live in is an ideal. So we make a village. It's close enough to the community so the children mix. They're in joint activities with other children. At the same time, it allows for creation of a safe, or safer at least, and more enabling environment for parents and the children. There's also the business model. The land acquisition is a first priority. And who will operate the village? So we're looking at section 21 and saying somebody that's got a nonprofit history, somebody that's been there for a while, somebody that has built relationships with people in the township would be a first choice. This model says we need to raise funds for construction. At the time, we thought it was 10 million for phase 1 because we have to do the infrastructure for the whole place. Excuse me, maybe 30 million for the entire complex. That's a significant piece of money, but it needs to be done in some phases. But again, infrastructure needs to be phase 1, and we need to be able to keep our children safe. So try to do the construction part of it well, and then raise money for that construction. So whether it's federal grants, local donations, whatever it is, trying to raise money for that. And again, that's separate from the land acquisition. And then the business model says that rent will cover the ongoing expenses, maintenance, and repairs. Foster families will be responsible for creating income to pay the rent. So you can't stay and have both parents be foster parents and be full-time foster parents. The model really suggests that one person would be out working and bringing in some income, and the other person stay at home and be available all day as needed. So here's my conclusion. There's a vast and rapidly increasing need for fostering. Often fostering takes place in the harshest of circumstances and very little support for foster parents. This concept proposes a solution to the problem for some families, not all families, just some families within the area of Buffalo City. Solution is intended for replication on a much larger scale. So hopefully, my goal is that we would make steps towards something like this and have a pilot project with houses built, foster families living in it, someone local that is already working in the children and social and school environment to be able to perform the day-to-day activities. For the concept to work, the initial infrastructure needs to be financed out of grant funding. Funders will be contributing to a model that could ultimately see a vast improvement in lives, the prospects of hundreds, maybe thousands of vulnerable children for many years to come. The deepening of the crisis involving vulnerable children makes intervention critical. And I'll say not just for South African society, but for all of us. And that goes from the United States to all of Africa to all of Europe. I think vulnerable children are one of the things that we need to keep front and center when we start talking about development. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof. Wasserman, with a very constructive presentation, which somehow it shows the level of commitment in terms of how then the problem of housing backlog and also the issue of housing can be resolved through joint effort from different stakeholders. I think we have touched upon in your presentation in terms of how then can we also look at one of the vulnerable groups. In this case, you're focusing much on children, which we all know that that kind of a group is somehow very excluded, more particularly in our policies. But I think also what has come very clearly in your presentation is the use of the concept of sustainability in your presentation there. Without wasting too much time, I would want to invite, if there are colleagues who will want to raise some questions as a follow-up or point of clarity to Prof. Brian Wasserman's presentation. Is there anyone who would have got some burning questions, point of clarity that they will want to engage? Prof, just very quickly, maybe from my side, just to open the, I've seen that we are proposing a business model here that you'll want to see maybe to carry this forward there. I'm sure that once you look at the issue of housing, in most cases, we are always faced with a very critical problem of maladministration and corruption. So how will then this model, in one way or the other, can be able not to be influenced by those challenges that we come across when it comes to housing governance?
I don't think you can avoid it. The intended business model is a nonprofit that has been running well, and analyzing the nonprofits, not just every nonprofit would be under that quality if you put them under a microscope. I think there will be some who have done well. I know within our group, there are people running businesses already. And if they, they would know places to be Section 21 that would be able to take donations that could build a community like this. So it's a challenge, no doubt. And corruption was one of the issues we ran into. This was a few years ago, but that was all of the government funded in the Eastern Cape sustainable housing was suspended for a period of time as directors and others were shown the door. So yes, it's an issue. We need to find ways to make sure that we have honest people running honest businesses.
Okay, thank you so much, Prof. Let me just say, maybe some of the other questions may come late because we are also having two other presenters. Let's allow those presenters, maybe we'll come back to some of the, with some other questions, Prof, because these are some of the interesting discussions. Let me now allow Sophie to be the next presenter. I think the topic is the role of the private sector in affordable housing development, comparisons between the United States and South Africa. Let me allow you, Sophie, to then present.
Sorry, Chair. I think we now have Gembi Alalade instead of Sophie McManus.
Okay.
For integration of refugees and immigrants into the Canadian housing system in the city of Edmonton. Mr. or Miss Gemi Alalade, can you please unmute yourself and start your presentation? I'll share the screen for you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, wherever you are. My name is Bemi Alalade, and I hope you all can hear me. And this morning, I'll be presenting the topic, integration of refugees and immigrants into the Canadian housing system in the city of Edmonton. Edmonton is a city located in the province of Alberta, Canada. And do I have the power to change the...
Yes, you do have remote control rights, so you can scroll down and up as you please.
Let me see where I can do that. I'm trying to... You can control, yes, the option. Okay, good. Can you just go to the next screen then? I can't see how I can do that here. Okay, so housing is known to be one of the most indispensable necessity of human life and a significant asset to every nation. It is the human right that offers concrete standard that can be implemented and measured for progress. Hence, the results can be transformative and shift away from clarity towards social justice. That's my understanding of housing. And Canada as a country is a country in North America, in the North American continent, and it's known for its economic and political stability, coupled with many other multicultural and multilingual environments. This morning, what I'm looking at, what I'm presenting will be the integration of refugees and other immigrants into the Canadian housing system. And I looked in particular to the case of the city of Edmonton to give us an understanding of that immigrants integrate into the system. And as we know, the issue of refugee is something that is not ending. As the world is trying to settle one conflict, another one is rising up. So we have continuously refugees, people that are displaced at one time or the other. And also we have some people that are migrating from different parts of the world to another, from different countries to into another country for different reasons. And presently, we have more than 65 million people that are at risk of being displaced due to war or any other mishap that is happening within their home country, and they are being forced to leave their country and to move elsewhere. If we look at some of the countries that have been receiving refugees and immigrants in the last 10 years, I think Canada is one of the top countries that is leading. And we've received more than between 20 to 40,000 refugees annually. That's the number that Canada receive annually. And because Edmonton is a strategic city in Canada, lots of refugees tend to want. That's why we're looking at Edmonton as an example for settlements for refugees and immigrants. Next slide, please. Now, in Canada, we have different terms for immigrants and newcomers that come into the city, that come into the country. People that are referred to as immigrants are people that come from one country and that plan to settle in another country. This is a general term that we use for people that move from one country to the other. But for newcomers, newcomer is a person who is within the first several years of their arrival. That is, they are newcomers. People that just moved in are referred in Canada. And settlers are people that have been living in a particular city for a very long time, and they are living there permanently. Next slide, please. I wish I can be doing this, not so. Okay, and in Canada, we have some classes of migration that we refer to. There's a common scheme that is referred to as the federal skilled worker, where a person is selected as a permanent resident based on their education, work experience, knowledge of English or French, and other factors that the Canadian government deem necessary, and as the profession or the qualification fits into the Canadian labor market. In this class of within this class of people, they are also allowed to bring in their spouses and their children into the country as a federal skilled worker. And also we have the family class, where a person that resides in Canada can sponsor a family member to move into the country with him or her. And also we have the temporary foreign worker. These are people that are recruited from outside of the country to fill the job, to fill the skill shortage that is happening within the country at any particular point in time. And also we have a person that is refugee, which refers to a person that is being forced to flee as a result of war, violence, conflict, or persecution, and other stuffs happening around their home country. Next slide, please. In Canada, to be precise, we have three classes of refugee. We have the one being referred to as a government assistant refugee. These are people that, according to the United Nations Commissioner for Refugees, these are people that the government of Canada sponsored out of their own country as a result of war or certain things that are happening that require them to be displaced. So, and also we have the privately sponsored refugees. These are people that a community or a group of people, a family member can sponsor to come and take asylum in Canada. And also we have people that we refer to as refugee claimants. These are people that just walked into the border of Canada claiming, oh, I can go back to my country. I need refuge in Canada. Next slide, please. Looking at all these classes of people that we refer to as either immigrant or refugees, we see we have different types, different categories of people coming in to the country, taken as immigrants and as refugees. And when we looked at this in a whole, we'll see that Canada as a country country, which happens to be a very big country, one of the largest, is a country that many people want to come into.
We seems to be losing our presenter. Seems to be losing our.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Proceed.
Oh, good. Thank you so much. So, like I said, some of the cities that receive most of these immigrants and refugees into Canada are Edmonton, Calgary, Winnipeg, Hamilton, Ottawa, and also Toronto. These are the big cities in Canada that receives, and so many factors communicate to the fact that people want to reside, either immigrants or refugees want to reside within this city because there are some attractions that attracted them. It's maybe because of the economic reasons. To be admitting, to be precise, the province of Alberta is known for oil boom because that's where we have majority of the oil companies. So lots of refugees would want to come into the city, want to come into the province to work in the oil fields. And as a result of this influx, we have need for housing. There's a great need to cater for housing. So how do they integrate when they come into the city into housing? That's what we are looking at. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in Canada, Canadians are among the best housed people in the world. This is something that Canadians are always proud of because they refer to Canada as one of the best or the safest country migrant and refugees coming to the city of Edmonton is getting adequate and affordable housing to settle into with their families. It is a key concern to the City Council and government of Alberta. And because of this, different strategies are being used to overcome this challenge. One of the housing condition, one of the strategies that they've used, that because housing conditions has greatly improved since the post-war period, and because the population has doubled, the government has also introduced more housing scheme into the system. Next slide, please. Because in Canada, housing is mainly a private sector activity. The government contributes little or nothing to housing. Provision. It is most of the houses that are being built are mostly built by private investors. Next slide, please. Even though these houses are being built by private investors, the government still oversee the supervision and the control of housing affordability and the cost of housing and materials. So the government, in a way, is putting in some budgets into construction to make sure that housing is still affordable. Housing construction and renovation make an important contribution to the Canadian economy. Like we've discussed like we've heard from the previous presenters, construction takes a major part of every economy. And it's also the same in Canada. In 1997, almost 40 billion was spent on new home building and renovations, which is an equivalent of almost 5% of Canadians' GDP. Housing technology and productivity have improved progressively through the post-war period. The techniques, products, and skills involved in building and renovating housing in Canada are world-class. They are constantly evolving as various parts of the industry explore innovation to produce high-quality housing that is also cost-effective. Next slide, please. Despite all these accomplishments that we have in Canada, the Canadian housing system is not perfect. Every system can be improved on, and at any time, there are varieties of public and private sectors issues and challenges which confront the housing system. And as a result, the system is constantly evolving and changing. For example, finding appropriate financing mechanism to support ownership as the nature of work changes and encourages innovation in various parts of the system presents an ongoing challenge. Previously, we talked about housing finance, housing affordability. Canada is not an exemption. This challenge is all around the world, because as the technology is evolving, as we're bringing in new technology into the housing system, there's need for finance. People that need houses, some are low-income earners with special needs, and this presents a major challenge to them. Not all Canadians have access to appropriate housing at the cost with which they can afford. We have more than 700 subsidized housing units that are maintained by government. But even at that, that is not still sufficient to take care of the needs of the populace. Next slide, please. There are some strategies that are employed by immigrants and refugees in order to access housing. Housing in Canada is generally supervised by the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation. Housing types includes detached houses. These are houses, a single family house. Semi-detached houses, townhouses, which we also call terrace duplexes, and we have condominiums, popularly known as condo. Condo is what most immigrants and refugees can afford to stay in. Because of the high cost of detached houses and semi-detached houses and townhouses, most of these houses within this category are not within the affordability range of refugees and immigrants coming into the city. So they will prefer to go for houses that we refer to as condo, which in some countries we refer to as block of flats or flats. These are high-rise buildings that have, where each apartment has like 2 or 3 bedrooms. That is within the range of what
again, it seems to be losing our presenter, but I would also want to invite him to start to conclude. We have gone beyond. Are you back with us? Spare seems to be losing him.
Sorry for that technical itch. It's the network that keeps fluctuating here.
Can I also request you to start closing, please?
Okay, so they go. The government settled into they move into areas where they can settle temporarily, and government subsidize their housing for the first 1 year, after which each refugee is expected to take care of his or herself. Next slide, please. Okay, next slide, please. I talked about this already. Okay, so for a refugee or an immigrant to access housing, there are certain documents that are required by landlords. You need to provide your statement of account to show that you are able to pay the rent. You need to provide your pay slip if you start working as a proof of income, and also a referral letter from somebody, a previous landlord. And because refugees and newcomers are new in the country, most of these documents they do not have. So there are government agencies and non-government organizations that step in for them to take care of some of these needs, just to make sure they get a safe place to live. Next slide, please. And also, some immigrants are coming into the country and refugees coming into the country with some cash, and they want to buy a house immediately. This is not allowed in the country because you need to go through the government to be able to access a mortgage in order for you to be able to get a house. But what they refer most people to do is to go into renting an apartment for at least a year before they can access financing for a mortgage. Next slide, please. Canada's housing system works well. It is one of the best in the world. In large measure, the system works so well because the infrastructure, which has evolved over the years. For example, Canada has a wealth of expertise in all the disciplines required in the housing system. From urban planning to design, through civil engineering, market analysis, construction practices, building products, marketing, sales, and host of other areas. Key components are also included in the legal framework that protects the ownership and transfer of properties rights, and high developed financial infrastructure and facilities, and that facilitates the financing required for housing production. In other words, housing in Canada are being teleguided by the government, and refugees and immigrants, once they follow the process, they can easily integrate into the Canadian housing system. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the insightful presentation, which has been sharing with the delegates here in terms of what is happening, more particularly in another part of the world, which is Canada in this case, where you have been applying the concept of integration in your presentation in terms of how then immigrants are integrated in the housing system. I think you have also presented a lot in terms of different types of these refugees, and also what is accessible for them, and also the qualification criteria. The also most important thing that you've also highlighted in your presentation is the role of different actors in the housing system in Canada, in terms of what is the role of the government, that of being a regulator, but also market forces are also allowed to play a critical role also in this, meaning that they've got that responsibility to invest, whilst also, but you have also highlighted some of the other challenges in terms of how difficult it is for immigrants sometimes to access, but you also presented different housing typologies which are also found in Canada. I'm not quite too sure. Let me just invite in 1 minute, in 1 or 2 minutes, before we have our last presentation, if there are some burning questions from the delegates here who will want to then ask some questions, clarity, where possible. Okay, let me just say, stay on the line. We'll come back because I do have some few questions, but I also want us to give the last presenter the opportunity to present before yeah, so that you can finish in time here. Spare, do we have another presentation? I think we're supposed to be having Ms. Moto and also Brendan.
Yes, we do. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see it.
An assessment of water services.
Yes, I see that one.
Yeah, that's the presentation for Ms. Moto and Brendan Patrick Boyce.
Okay, let's invite them to then take their opportunity to present. Over to you, Ms. Moto and Brendan. I'm not sure. You can just introduce yourselves before you continue, whoever is going to present.
All right. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's an afternoon here in South Africa. I am Obabongile Moto. I'll be presenting on behalf of the two of us, for Mr. Boyce and I. I'm presenting a presentation on assessment of water services in the Eastern Cape, which is a province in South Africa, under Amatole municipality, a small town, a case of a small town called Alice, which is in Raymond Mhlaba municipality. Next slide, please, for me, please. All right. In this study, we are highlighting actually the reliable and efficient water services of how it ensures or how it aids a sustainable human settlement. And in the study, we'll be considering an importance of water delivery services to a small human settlements in Alice, which is a small town in the Eastern Cape. We'll evaluate the importance of it disruptive of water provisions to the local municipality, the private businesses, educational institutions like University of Fort Hare, Lovedale, and other local economic institutions that are there. Secondly, in this study, we will highlight a role of your local municipality in designing and implementing water maintaining services in a form of reticulation systems or structures. In the study, we have adopted qualitative research method. And in addition to this, we use a case study that allowed us as researchers to be able to investigate the research questions in depth. And you must understand that we did this research or this paper during the COVID times where ways of collecting data were very limited. Lastly, in addition to this, we will highlight the coping strategies that local municipalities or communities, businesses, and institutions employed or kind of employed to try and curb or to try and assist themselves in the season of scarcity of water. Then the last point on my abstract would be this study will highlight the key challenges that the municipality is facing in order to adequately deliver water or deliver adequate reticulation water projects to collect, to treat, and reuse water efficiently. And also we'll analyze the infrastructure, identify the progress and opportunities and challenges concerning water services project in this small town called Alice. The impact it has had, we cannot leave Fort Hare out, University of Fort Hare out when we are speaking about Alice, because it's the life of Alice. So we'll also highlight the impact that water services has done in the University of Fort Hare. The next slide, this is just a map just to show you Alice town. It's in Raymond Mhlaba municipality, as I said, which is a category B municipality. It falls under Matwelo district, and it is in the Eastern Cape, which is in South Africa. Next slide for me, please. This basically here is just a picture to show you the water reticulation center or systems where they treat water and make sure they supply water to the necessary villages and communities around. Next slide, please. Okay. We know South Africa is in the sub-Saharan Africa, which is one of the areas that have got water stress regions in the world. And due to that, it's got a chronic overburden of water delivery systems due to the rapid urbanization, as we know how we are moving into towns in Africa. And just to highlight this is that everybody wants to move to town, and the towns were designed back in the day for smaller communities. And with people moving into towns, the infrastructure, the water systems were not improved, which now leads us to where we are at the moment. And this is also attributed to the lack of good management in the government, the corruption and mismanagement of resources, the poor long-term investments, and the lack of maintenance of the existing infrastructure. And then the IDP of Raymond Mhlaba of 2021 provides for us that the area, Alice, was declared as a drought area. right? And besides, it is affected by the climate change, of course, but as I said earlier, it is also affected by the urban sprawl, how people are just moving into towns and the facilities and resources have not been improved. And Alice is one of the small towns that has been experiencing a great migration, you see. And with all of that, and with the RDP houses being built, and even the university itself, it's increasing residences, there is no increase in the infrastructure, which has led the town to have a poor drainage system as well, such that in 2020, Alice Town was hit by a flood after a rain of just an hour. A flood, people died, businesses were affected, a lot of damage was done in the Alice Town just for a rain of an hour, which highlighted to us the great need, or the great the great predicament we are facing as Alice of having a poor drainage system. Next slide for me, please. All right, this next slide, it shows this is the flood that happened in 2020. This is just outside the university. This is a new mall. It's actually about 8 years in existence, not even 10 years as yet. So you can already see how the development in itself is good for the town, but the drainage system now is being the problem. Next slide. Okay, as I said, this study was done during COVID times. So it was more of a desktop analysis where it was just a literature review based study mostly. We have consulted a number of literature reviews, but studying with which the Constitution of the country of 1996, it provides for water as a constitutional right, that everybody has a right of access to water as a right. Even though it's provided in the Constitution, and there are other documents and policies that speak to the provision of water, water still continues to be the very same scarce resource that for most people in South Africa, not only in the Eastern Cape province, in other provinces as well, are still in need or have limited access to, right? And as much as it stands, so it's provided by the Constitution itself. And it also, even in the Constitution itself, it highlights how the rural areas are the ones who are experiencing mostly this limitation of water. And as I highlighted in the beginning, Alice is a rural town. So it really is affected by this. Two, UHAMSA in 2014, it also stipulates water as a natural resource that must be protected, which affects its protection here also as for water management, that it must be protected, it must be well managed. And if it was so, I'm sure wouldn't be where we are today. There are laws are provided, by the government to govern water, how water must be supplied and how water must be maintained. And these laws were drafted or were written to try and correct the ills of the past, which then the water government systems then provided for certain individuals, for their own domestic and agricultural or industrial water needs, which was not accommodating the whole citizens of South Africa. We can highlight a number. Water Service Act of 1997, 108, it provides for water as a service to all who live in South Africa, for all consumers to be able to access and consume water as they want. And there is National Act also of 1998, which deals as water as a natural state in itself and how people can access them. We have MDGs and SDGs, which highlight the importance of water and sanitation and how each and everyone has a right to be able to access that. And we move on. We have the Department of Water Affairs. We have water resource strategies. We have development program, which is the NDP. Yeah, the NDP. The NDP has a plan of 2030, that by 2030, everybody in South Africa, rural or not, must have an access to water. But if I can highlight right now, even right now in the Eastern Cape, the Nelson Mandela Bay is on day 0, but we have 8 years to go. So maybe there's still a chance for that. But currently, to be honest, South Africa, Eastern Cape province is facing a dire season on water supply. And then there are a number of scholars who write, I will mention a few, Mia, Ruteya, Kropeller. They highlight that there are a number of factors that affect development in Africa. Number one would be cost of delivery projects, aging infrastructure, maintenance of blockages, as well as lack of skill workers. Now, if this with them highlighting this and identifying the research or the paper itself in Alice, is that literally there's been a mismanagement in terms of maintaining the infrastructure, improving the infrastructure. When there's a development to be done in the town, whether it's housing or malls or schools or whatever, now there is no good channeling of funds to ensure that the infrastructure, more especially the water infrastructure, is also being improved. You know, as I said, Alice was created back then in the day for a few people who were working in the University of Forte, but now Alice has become bigger than that. You know, now it's not only just housing people, lecturers of University of Forte, it's housing a lot of people who are working there. There are a lot of departments. There is a lot of RTP houses as well that have been built there. So the infrastructure there is aging. You know, the maintenance blockages, look, there is a lack of maintenance in the infrastructure itself, you know, and a lack of skilled workers to make sure that, or even engineers, as Alice are small towns, so you hardly find the skilled people who specialize in these things like engineers to ensure that the infrastructure itself is well managed. Next slide, please. Am I still doing well on time? Let's skip the slide as well, so that I'm able to cover in every time. Okay, as I said, in methodology, we took a qualitative method in this research. And as I said earlier, this was during the COVID time, so we could not really go as wild as we had wanted. So we use an in-depth case study approach, because we were able at least to secure some interviews virtually with other stakeholders like the municipalities and maintenance, even of the University of Forte. So we were able to conduct some interviews virtually that we were able to source this paper. Also, we used a lot of Google Scholar. We had about 25 publications that we looked into to ensure the study as well. Okay, we can move to the next slide. Limitations of the study, as I said, this was just my honors paper. There was COVID time, so we could not really do it as we had wanted in terms of really being on the ground and engaging the community as we would wanted to do so. So those were the limitations. And most of the people sometimes were not working from work. So really we worked at their convenience and then their availability, which kind of affected and delayed our study. Can we move on the next slide? Okay, the current water infrastructure in Alice. As I said, Alice is a semi-rural town. It was created back in the day, it was formed back in the day, and the infrastructure then was there to serve quite a few hundreds of people staying there, not thousands of people staying there. So currently there's one dam that supplies Alice, and in April 2021, last year, it was on 40% of water supply in itself. And this water treatment dam is based in Telamans, which is a village just outside of the University of Forte, and it supplies a number of villages, around about 10 villages that are connected to it, which are around of Alice, and also on top of that, University of Forte in itself, which is housing over 15,000 people in itself. So they all depend on this one dam. And there are challenges facing the water supply of Alice. Number one is that there's unequal water distribution. Since the treatment dam itself is in Telamans, where most of municipality workers stay, lecturers stay. So you'd find out that they have more access to water than the other parts of Alice town, or even of the municipality itself. To the aging infrastructure, as I said, infrastructure was firstly done there when Alice was formed in the early 1900s, you see. So up until now, there's not been new infrastructure to aid or to improve the infrastructure currently existing of water systems in Alice town in itself. And yet people, the development, human said like the building of houses, RTP houses, departments and schools are being improved every day. And the infrastructure itself, it's left as it was, you see. So now it leads, or it yields to the blockages of drain, because the drain systems that are there are not capacitated to be able to carry so much people. All right. And then number two, you'd find out that the valves that are supplying certain parts of Alice, they are closed because they can only probably channel so much water to certain areas at times. And as I said earlier, there are other places that they seem to be preferred than the other, you know. And also we have an areas of RTP houses, which stays your people who are mostly needy, and some of them are poor, and they've got limited access of water because they rely on when water will be opened on their side. And in some of these areas, there are taps there, the pipes are there, but you'd find out that there's no connection to the main dam, or maybe there was, but probably, also with the poverty thing, people stealing pipes, it affects and feeds to more lack of water supply in such areas. With migration of people moving into Alice, and there is a need, and hence the municipality is building houses because people need accommodation, but we are highlighting a need of the infrastructure itself because there is no provision of such. Next slide for me, please. Okay, as I said, the dam in Alice is serving a number of villages. There is 58 in all. And also, as I'm saying, there's an increasing demand of houses to be built. So it means that in the near future, we are facing a more demand of water. And currently we have a crisis in itself. You see, and also you must understand that these villages also, they've got livestock, we've got small scale farmers, we are farming cattle and everything. And now you find that even the cattle themselves, they are suffering because there is no supply of water. Can we move to the next slide? Okay, the impact of the disruptions or lack of water in Alice is that there is water outages, which results now to businesses being closed, to schools being closed, university itself, it has to cancel classes from time to time because you cannot have students on campus in classes if they can't wash, they can't drink water, they cannot use the bathrooms, you see. So it affects the day-to-day activities of not only of the university, of the town as well, because even in town, there are government offices there. There's about Home Affairs, social development, there are clinics, hospitals, the services that people need, but now from time to time, they must be closed because there is no water in town. Please move to the next slide. Now, the University of Fort Hare and the Alice municipality, they try to come up with coping strategies because the water crisis has been there for over 5 years now, and there has not been an absolute solution. So University of Fort Hare was given a funding by DHET, which is Department of Higher Education, to build at least a tank that will be able to sustain the university for 48 hours in the event where there is no water at all. But the tank can only sustain the university just for 2 days. And sometimes you experience water to be gone for over a week or so. So, but it is something that they try to adopt. And also they've built a pump station house, which is just inside the university next to a residence, that also is supposed to pump some water to ensure that the university does have water from time to time. And they've tried to replace the water valves as well, to try and maintain the water. Okay, conclude your presentation. All right. So in itself, the municipality has tried and find other ways of getting more supply of water without prevailing as it is right now. Can you just move to the next slide? I am told to conclude. Yeah. Also, the municipality tried to increase the tank in itself just about 5 megaliters to ensure that it tries to curb or tries to assist the community as well. And also they approved rural yards to be able to have water for themselves, hoping that they'll be able to maintain them. Yeah, and they've tried to reduce water leakages. They've tried to fix pipes, but that still does not answer the problem. Our last slide. Okay, this is probably my last slide. My findings: water shortages in Alice and surrounding areas are attributed to by aging infrastructure, as I've highlighted, a lack of maintenance, a lack of skill to be ensured water is preserved. There are leakages, as I said, aging infrastructure. There are leakages, so the other places are drying out, and also the overcrowding or overpopulation around Alice itself and even in the university itself. There are illegal water connections, which also tamper with the supply of water. And investing in infrastructure projects, it must improve to ensure that water mechanisms of Amatole and other projects are actually capped. Next slide. Our recommendations were to lobby private businesses to offer water services in times where there's water leakages or there's an outage of water. And number two, to set up water emergency response unit that when Alice is facing a water crisis, there's an emergency unit that is built there to be able to ensure that there are services that are provided, more especially the key areas like hospitals and schools. Effective water governments must address issues as diverse as regular creation of water infrastructure. We must provide training for the existing workers who are working with water, because the people are not skilled to be able to cap such things happening, and hiring more experts, or making, if possible, the municipality offer incentives for people to come, the skills to come into town. Next slide, I think I'm done. Yeah, I think I'm done.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ms. Moto. Maybe before we continue, because we should be closing by now, because it's already 1 o'clock, okay. I just want to make a request from our delegates here. I know we started very late. I think we're 15 minutes late. If we can just add the 10-15 minutes so that we give each and every presenter just an equal opportunity, because I just want to allow for some questions. This is just my request to my delegates here, that let us give, we know that the program was supposed to be ending at 1, but just to give our last presenter an opportunity just to respond to some of the questions if they are, because I think the subject that she was touching on is a very important and a critical one, more particularly when you are looking at an issue of climate change, because I think the whole discussion was around the scarcity of water and some of the other challenges which are also faced by municipalities in different areas, and also by some actors who are also working around the design, the infrastructure, and all others there. So let me just allow an opportunity for, if there are some reactions from the delegates, or if there are some burning questions or points of clarity that they require from our last presenter and also the presenter before that, I can still allow that to take place then. Any question? Okay, let me just ask my my question here. I think you have highlighted the aspect that there seems to be a huge demand for housing on the one hand, but it's also scarcity of water on the other hand. So I'm trying to look at how then the issue of human settlement, if we were to look at it, how is it going to be balanced, taking into consideration these different challenges that we have? Are there some thoughts around what could be the possible strategies? I know that we have highlighted that we do have some strategies in place, we do have some legislative and policy frameworks in place, but we seem to be still having some challenges. So how then do we balance the two? Because I know that when it comes to housing development, all necessary or basic amenities should also be provided. How then do we balance all these things then? I don't want to go back to, I've heard that in your presentation, there seems to be a violation of the constitutional right in one way or the other on the basis of some of these practices. But what do you foresee as could be the possible solution to these challenges that I've already highlighted?
Okay. If I may try to answer your question, sir. Number one, as I said, with the current infrastructure of Alice, if it could be improved, right, I am sure we could be able to aid water supply, because Alice in itself, it's close to a place called Hawksbeck. Hawksbeck in itself, it's got a natural waterfall. There's a great water supply You see, so if we could have infrastructure or even probably open up the water industry, or in Alice, open up for private sector to come in, yeah, to make sure that probably there is water, that or another way of water put from Hawksburg, because Hawksburg is just a few kilometers out of Alice. But currently, the infrastructure we have does not provide, or does not have access to be able to access water as far as Hawksburg is concerned. And number two, it's only municipality which is a sole provider of water in Alice. So if we could open up also for private sector to come in to see if they cannot aid itself, they can't aid water services in itself. I know currently even the DHET funding that was given to fund Forte, University of Forte, even the dam itself that was created, also it does also benefit the community in itself. So there's a greater need of pulling off resources. And when I say, I believe that with housing need, obviously people must be provided with housing, right? But however, I think if we are to build a settlement or build a housing in a place, let's ensure that we provide the necessary infrastructure to ensure sustainability of livelihood in that settlement. You see, because now what's happening is we cut off trees, we build houses, we leave the people there, we put in tanks, taps itself, and then there is no infrastructure to maintain the supply of that water, the drainage of that particular water. You see, because all these houses that are being built, they've got their bathrooms, they've got their they've got their toilets, in a lack of a better word, which then that must be connected to existing drain that is already aging in itself. You see, so a provision of better infrastructure, I think, could aid or could assist the situation a bit better.
Thank you so much, Siviwe. Your hand is up. Can you please unmute yourself and continue?
Thank you very much, Chair. Ms. Moto, thank you so much for such an interesting presentation. I just wanted to ask you, how dire is the situation? If, for example, things would continue the way they are continuing, where would that take, the Alice area? If there's no change, in other words, is this a ticking time bomb? How urgent is this thing? Because water is life, and I know in Alice, I mean, there's a lot of agricultural enterprise that are really water dependent. So how much of a ticking time bomb is this? If as a researcher, maybe you can give us just a rough estimate in terms of maybe weeks, months, days, years, if things were left, the way they are, in terms of that period. I mean, where is the city going to be? Like in a few months, in a few weeks, if things are left the way they are.
Okay, thank you so much, Siviwe, for that question. As I highlighted in my introduction, to say Eastern Cape is in tatters, it's in a very bad situation. Even currently, Nelson Mandela Bay, the former Port Elizabeth, is on day 0, so they are already suffering. So coming to Alice now, the situation is very bad. We did get a day 0 at some stage, hence the DHET funded to try and assist, because if the situation doesn't change. Last year, April, the dam in itself was on 40%, right? I'm not sure currently now, but with that in itself, when it's in 40%, we cannot have at least 7 days a week with water supply every day. It doesn't happen. We have to close water there and there to make sure that there's a supply in other institutions as well. So we are in a very critical, Alice is in a very critical state when it comes to water supply. It is in a very critical, dire state. You see, to such an extent that university classes had to be cancelled. Other activities had to be cancelled because Alice can have no water for 3 days in a row. You see, without any aid or other help that is there to aid the people. The municipality, of course, will bring a tank that will last a campus on one residence a day, one area a day. And after that, when the tanks are finished that are provided by the municipality, then there is no water at all. It is in a very critical critical situation, if I can put it like that. I could say day 0 is knocking at the door of Alice in no time.
Thanks, Ms. Muto.
Thank you.
It sounds as if they're already there.
Okay, thank you so much for responding to Siviwa's question. As I had already requested, we left with only 5 minutes for us to close, unless only if there's a burning question, I can allow that because I'm about to close this session now. Any reaction? Okay, thank you so much to all delegates. I think you have been good participants in a sense that we were able to learn a lot, and a number of empirical case studies has been presented in this session, starting with the work of Wasserman, which was looking at the question of sustainability in the construction industry. And we also moved on to how then can we also ensure that we have got safety homes for foster care. I think those were all, which also presented a business model, which can also be replicable if it can be applied, if it can be well applied. And we've also had some other presentation also, which was also touching upon how to integrate refugees in the housing system. And also lastly, we're also, Ms. Mott was also sharing with us another interesting aspect, which was also now in line with our thematic area of this group, which we really had also appreciated that one. And I think we may also request that you also share with us with some of those presentations, if spare we don't have those presentations, because we may still want to use them for preparing the reports for this session. But from where I am currently, thank you so much for being good presenters and also for being good delegates in this session. Then I think all the critical matters which were discussed here are very informative, and those are things which are affecting us in our daily lives. So for those who are pursuing their research in these areas, let us all continue to be committed and to continue to research, because I'm sure we are all looking for how then we can have a better society going forward then. And also, I'm sure we are all thriving that how can we improve the situation as we continue, but also let's strive and take home the concept of sustainability, because all what we are doing today, we are not doing it for ourselves, but we are also thinking along what should then, how then the future generation can also benefit from this. I think with the opening with that critical concept, I think it gives us much more things to think about, that let us not only deal with the current situation, let us also see how then we move forward with whatever that we do. With that being said, thank you so much from our technical supporter to this, and also to my co-chair and all of you. Let me just close this session for now. Thank you so much, colleagues.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you.
No.